Hey guys, this is Warwick from Casual Chess, back for another 5-minute game today. Looks like I'm playing as white, and I'm going to start with e4. My opponent plays c6, d5, and we're getting into a version of the Qa6 exchange variation. Looks like my opponent's playing rather quickly. I'm looking to develop these pieces in a fairly ordinary fashion. Getting my bishops out, might look to sacrifice one of those. I'll drop that one back for now, trying to encourage g5 to be played so that I can weaken the pawns on the king side. I will sacrifice that bishop though, and after retakes, something like Ne5 I think. I'll retake there, and now castling. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with some of these pieces off the board, so that's good. My opponent's playing nice and fast, so I like to have a couple more pieces off the board when my opponent does that, rather than on the board. Okay, my opponent plays Bb4 now, probably trying to encourage me to play to something like Na4, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead play Ne2. Okay, I've encouraged that G5 move that I mentioned earlier. I'll drop that back to Bg3, and my opponent's actually missed a move there on B8, that rook move. Okay, so where to next? Well, first I'm going to try and play A3, kicking that back. Wow, okay, look, I really have to say my opponent is moving very fast, far too fast for me, but it's not causing any problems at the moment. I'm just going to slow down and try and think about this a little bit better now. I'm looking at something like F3, potentially. With something like F3, I force my opponent to drop back to D6 with that knight, or possibly F6. I think that's what I will play. F3, pardon me. And I may then look to something like Queen A6. I think Queen A6 now, because threatening something like C6. Okay, I was kind of expecting that. Now, how to take advantage of this is the question. I think Rook E1, trying to line these rooks up along the E and F files and get aggressive along there. Okay, my opponent plays Nf5. Nf5 is not great because it is attacking that D4 square. Now my option would be to drop back to D3 or potentially move to A4, and I think I would drop back to D3 because although my opponent's knight may seem protected there on F5, it's not. I could take on F5 and my opponent won't be able to retake with the E6 pawn. It would have been because of a pin, although he has now he is now castled, so that gets rid of that maneuver. Tempting for me now to play something like G4, but I don't see a need for that at the moment. We'll look at something like E5, Rook E5. Something like F6 can't be played because otherwise Rook takes E6. I must admit I don't see the point of that maneuver at the moment. I think what I'll do is I'll start to stack up on the E file. This was to be expected. And what about a sacrifice now on F5? I don't think I'll focus on retaking. I will play the sacrifice, and I'll try and get a little bit more of a concrete advantage on the board. Okay, obviously D4 is a threat. I think I'll simply play H1. Well, that's a big mistake there from my opponent. I'll simply take Queen C8. Huge error. Queen F5. Now, obviously limited time remaining for me here, but if I can simply trade off the board, I think this will be an ideal situation. Looking now at something like E4 check. E4 check is able to be played. I'll take, and now I think we'll be able to win this game fairly easily. Okay, I think my opponent really should resign in this position, and he has. I must say there was definitely a quicker way for me to end up checkmating him there rather than trying to advance down the board and getting 2 queens, but I kind of just wanted to indicate to him, look, please resign. And especially when you're under time pressure, it can be easier to get a checkmate using something like 2 queens, or even 3 queens if you're up for it. And I have to say, you know, in a situation like that, I would resign, unless it's obvious to me that my opponent can really checkmate me, because to me it's just the polite thing to do. It's recognizing that you've been bested and then going on from there. But anyway, look, that's a good win for today, and my opponent did make an error, but let's see how the rest of the game played out. Okay, I'll be back with the analysis in just a moment. Okay guys, we're back with the analysis now. So as you can see in the top right hand corner, 68.4% accuracy from me, 73.1% for my opponent. Now why is my opponent higher if I won the game, and if in this graph that you can see below I end up significantly on top? Well, the reason is because I missed a number of mates. So looking to here, you can see a mate in 8 that was missed. Further along there is a mate in 9, mate in 6, mate in 5, 4, 3, and then I perpetually missed a mate in 3 while I was advancing down the board here. So just looking at that now, you can see there's a mate in 3, still advancing, mate in 3, still advancing, mate in 3, still advancing, and really I just refuse to acknowledge that. So that's why my accuracy percentage was lower than it should otherwise have been. That's my fault, I'll accept that. I probably should have taken advantage of those mates rather than trying to advance down the board, but as I explained at the end of that game, there was a reason for that. Okay, now there was a time when my opponent had the advantage, and that was... where was this? This was about 12 moves deep or so. I simply didn't take control of the center as much as I otherwise could have. We were playing quickly at the start, but my opponent didn't really take advantage of the fact that he had control of the center. And so from here we really achieved equality pretty quickly, so that's one good thing. Now looking at the report again, I did get a pretty significant advantage, and the reason was after my opponent played G5 and my bishop was forced to drop back to G3 as a result, he neglected the fact that he had a rook on B8, which my bishop was now aiming at. He simply tried to position his knight to E4, which was a very good square for it, admittedly, but it allowed my bishop to take on B8. So that was a bit of advantage which I managed to crystallize a little bit for a while, but after a while then it did drop back down. And you can see that when I made that sacrifice of my rook for a knight and a pawn, we were roughly equal again now. I think that's about here after I had tried to take advantage of the double pawns on the d file of my enemy. We were pretty well equal again. Now again, some errors here. The big one being this one. So rook to c8. He simply neglected the fact that I actually had my queen aiming at that c8 square, and from there he was pretty much lost. So I think yeah, it was a good and bad game. I could have taken a better advantage of the center. I also could have better selected a sacrifice rather than playing something like, as you see here, rook takes f5, taking a knight and a pawn in exchange for a rook. I could have played that better. But anyway, we got the win in that game. My opponent really probably went a bit too fast. You can see by the end he had 3 minutes and a half almost versus my 11 seconds. So there's that. But overall, pretty happy with that. 20 best moves for me, 22 for my opponent. 5 excellent moves for me, 4 for my opponent. Quite a lot of good moves, and for me, 13 of those. Most of those came when I had the option to get a checkmate, but I failed to take advantage of that, trying to advance those pawns down the board to become queens. So that's why there's so many of those and why they're not better counted under best move or excellent move. Quite a few inaccuracies. That's sort of to be expected, and the missed win of course is not good, but that's again failing to take advantage of those checkmates. No blunders this time, which is great, and my opponent had 5, which is really where I managed to take control. So a couple of personalized training tips: rooks on the 7th rank, pins, mate and 3+, double rooks and passed pawns. So those would be the things for me to work on, but overall pretty happy with that. My opponent was actually higher rated when we began that game, and I've since overtaken him, so that's good. We're over 1400 rating again now and doing pretty well, so hopefully we can continue this streak, and I'll see you guys in the next game, which will probably be tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed. If you would like to, please leave a like. If you don't want to, please let me know what I could do better. Thanks.